Welcome, everyone. I'm Devin Patrick Hughes with the Boulder Symphony with another virtual Virtuoso session coming up. Really excited to bring back longtime collaborator, violin virtuoso, composer, performance artist, and I'm sure there's a myriad of other things that he does that time permits us not to go into right now. But Gregory Walker, it's so great to have you with us, and we're really excited to getting into your performance.
Thanks so much, Maestro.
Gregory is somebody who the Boulder Symphony goes back even before we were the Boulder Symphony. You have history with the ensemble, not just composing, but performing and conducting. And
That's
we met
right.
about 10 years ago now. And can you talk about, just your experiences with not only the Boulder Symphony, but your history in the Boulder community?
I feel as if even though my family had moved around quite a bit before we arrived in Boulder, that I grew up in this area. And so I've seen quite a bit of change, to be sure. I've seen the musical institutions rise and develop and change directions. And I would say that with the arrival of Maestro Hughes, things definitely opened up, especially with my area of interest, just contemporary music, new sounds, new kinds of approaches. I know it's a huge leap for any community to support one orchestra, right? And let alone more than that, but to embrace the classical repertoire and then also be aware and nurture where it's going is a very special thing. And so I've always been thankful for your contributions.
Well, and I think that's something that we can say as a community, not just Boulder, but Denver area, all of Colorado, in fact, so many arts groups, so many orchestras, so many opportunities, not only to hear, the dead white guys, but so much new music that is so crucial to orchestras thriving these days. You are in and out of a lot of those groups, a lot of chamber groups too, nationally, internationally. Can you maybe talk about, for people listening, what are some things that you found successful and things that arts groups are doing these days to get through this pandemic?
Well, these days, of course, are a very unique time. That said, moving forward, what we learn from this time is something that not only is going to be important for future decades. I don't think we'll ever be able to go back 100% to the way music was presented and promoted as it was before. But I think that what we learn could be of particular value to the contemporary music world, to the world of people within the art music tradition who are trying to innovate and push boundaries, because there, frankly, has not been consistent support for these people, people like myself, who's kind of on the fringes in many ways. And this development of technology, of new practices, I think has a lot of potential. I will say that in working with groups around the country, I'm more and more aware of true success stories, people using a format not unlike what we're working with right now, who have managed to expand their subscriber base, to even get more participation, even a larger audience than they were able to have before this past year. So the potential is there.
That's great. So I see on your wall you have a picture of George Walker, the so-called dean of African American composers, one of the greatest American composers of the 20th century. I understand that you come from this long line of great musicians and composers and performers. And of course, people are going to see in just a few minutes with Lori, with your wife.
It's something that was in place before I arrived, usually in the form of pianists. On my mother's side, certainly a lot of piano pedagogues. And it was a little bit inevitable for me. And it's just kind of the family language, to be sure. I think when it comes to what you'll be hearing with the performance now, the tradition kind of leads to what my mother, Helen Walker Hill, a pianist and a researcher, was able to investigate, explore, and bring to light in the world of African American women composers, whom she pursued and researched all around the country.
So you've got a really eclectic program coming up. We've got the Sarasate, the Pablo de Sarasate, one of the great violin virtuosos. The Spanish side, of course, there's Paganini on the Italian side, and Joseph Joachim on the German side, all in that mid to late 1800s. You're kind of that in many ways now. You're not only performing other people's music, but you've taken between the two of us. You've taken the liberty of creating some really incredible premieres, not just for violin, but electric violin, electric cyber guitar, all these incredible solo instrumental pieces that you've created. Can you talk about that life of the composer and performer, and maybe how that's evolved over the past couple of centuries?
Well, the composer-performer tradition is something that I think we look to the very beginning of so-called classical music and see was perfectly organic, perfectly natural. For creative artists to be able to perform their own ideas makes a lot of sense. The bifurcation, the split, and the segregation is something that's relatively a recent phenomenon. So then it's just a question of how one keeps up one's chops in both areas, how one manages to fully bring to life the creative possibilities without limiting them with one's own skill set, with one's own knowledge base. For me personally, when it comes to a few of these approaches to combining technology and art and music composition, it's a continual challenge, to keep up with the latest and greatest updates and inventions that are available. But when I was working on the particular piece of music we're going to be hearing, it was more of a backwards view, just looking at the tradition of the violin sonata and even looking at the music of my father, George Walker, and incorporating elements, literal quotes, in what I was writing.
And I would just add right now, speaking of your father, anybody who wants to kind of delve more into that relationship that you guys had and how his music and his performance affected your work, is please, I welcome you to check out One Symphony podcast called Father and Son. Gregory and I go at length into all that cool stuff, and you get to hear some really great pieces of Gregory's and his father's. So just getting back to this program, of course, we've got the Sarasate, the Carmen Fantasy. 1875, Bizet composes this grand opera, Carmen, with Don Jose and Escamillo, all these great characters, the love triangle, which of course doesn't end very well, as most operas. And Bizet never heard it. He passed away before its success became evident. And then Sarasate, about 8 years later, takes some of just these brilliant tunes that are some of the most famous, most beloved tunes ever created, and he creates this really virtuosic solo piece.
Well, I feel as if my relationship with Carmen Fantasy, the Sarasate, goes way back. I remember as a student going to a master class by the legendary teacher Joseph Gingold. And this guy was so big time that in this master class, he had just the most amazing violin students playing. At one point, Joshua Bell got up and he played Charles Ives Sonata. Did pretty well, a couple of memory lapses. And then I was thinking, we're done here. What could possibly follow this? But then they had one more violin student who got up. It was someone, violinist named Nayeon Hu. And he played the Carmen Fantasy. It was the first time I heard it. And at that point, I was hooked by the fireworks. Since then, with this piece, of course, we'll only be listening to an excerpt from it. It's something that I've played many, many places. I can remember performances in Beijing. I can remember performance. By the time I got to Andalusia, Spain, I played this piece. And there's a violinist came up and said, "That's not the way we play it here." And by then I was thinking, something, You have no idea how often I hear that. That's pretty much a response wherever I play. So nothing new there. So that piece is something that I trot out whenever humanly possible.
For the other two, you've got Rachel Eubanks, who is an incredible African-American composer born 1922 in San Jose, California. She opened a school in 1951 that actually trained kind of the consummate musician. She studied with Nadia Boulanger in France in 1977.
The Eubanks is one of the pieces that my mother and I uncovered. We loved it. And there's actually an edition, a published edition you can find that we edited of this piece. So we consider ourselves bona fide champions of that. And
is there any, just to kind of follow up on that, is there any place where people can go to hear more of Rachel Eubanks' music? Because I couldn't really find a repository.
Yes, it's interesting. Just a few recordings one finds online. If you're thinking to yourself, oh, I need my Rachel Eubanks fix, that's where you actually would go and purchase the edition that my mother and I developed. I think it's published by Hildegard Press.
Awesome.
And just kind of figure out the notes for yourself.
And then to finish the program, you're going to perform a piece of your own called Breakdown, which I believe you won an Academy of Arts and Letters prize for that.
With my own sonata, it's something that's available through Bella Grove. It's a 2-movement sonata, of which we'll only be hearing the second movement, Breakdown, today.
Great. And can you talk about the inspiration behind Breakdown?
Well, on the one hand, it was something that was heavily influenced by listening to fiddle music, like bluegrass fiddle music, and the breakdowns there. We won't even go into the psychological implications of what it also represents. Okay. But in the midst of it, I did, to my father, some of the things that he would do to other composers. I quoted his own sonatas directly within my own. And I don't know that he was particularly appreciative of that. But it was an homage. It was, it was done out of affection. And the effect is something that I think is pretty distinctive. There's definitely a lot of fiddling in there. And there's also a lot of plucking going on. I think the breakdown tradition of banjo playing, guitar playing makes an appearance in this piece as well.
Great. Well, I'm sure that he's looking from above, and you have done him proud for all the lives you've touched and all the incredible performances you've given and all the amazing creations you've made. And we're just really thrilled to feature you again. And this we're looking forward to sharing this performance. And I also wanted to thank everybody who's with us right now, who's joined us for this. This music, these programs can't happen without your support. So if you like what you're seeing, if you like what you're hearing, both live events and these virtual events, please do feel free to make a contribution. We have some information on how to do that below. So thank you, Gregory, for joining us, and I'm looking forward to your performance.
Thanks so much.